Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this video service of the First Unitarian Church of Alton on the 26th day of July in 2020. I'm Robin Berkeley, and I'm doing double duty today as the worship associate and featured speaker for today's service. We acknowledge that we create and listen to this worship service on Illinois land colonized by white Europeans through the labor of enslaved Africans. We invite you to remember the heritage of the land that holds you in your location today. We welcome everyone to this online home of comfort, spirit, justice, and hope. We are Unitarian Universalists. We begin our worship with a prelude by our accompanist, Joy Heft.
Okay. When I was a boy, each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. Used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
If you have a chalice or a candle at home, I invite you to join me as I light mine. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Our opening words this morning come from the Gray Hymnal, and the prayer is entitled Connections Are Made Slowly by Marge Piercy. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot always tell by looking what is happening. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in, a thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us, interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs. Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen. Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in. This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always. For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes. Our prayer today is The Importance of Spiritual Practice by Lydia Sohn. Here's the thing about our minds. They are gifted in solving problems for us. This is what they were made to do. Because of them, we have been able to create automobiles, computers, gluten-free cupcakes, and other amazing inventions. But sometimes our minds make up problems in order to be useful, and we end up feeling anxious, fearful, angry, worrisome, and distracted as a result. We need to be able to put our minds at rest in order to be able to come back to the present moment and connect with our source energy, which is our never-ending source of peace, joy, abundance, and love. This is what spiritual practices do for us. They help reground us when our minds have worked themselves up into a flurry of emotions. Spiritual practices disconnect us from the creative machinations of our mind and help us realign with our souls. I like to do some kind of spiritual practice every day, and they are essential during critical junctures when I am especially prone to creating anxiety or fantasy narratives. One of my spiritual teachers told me to make an important life decision. Let me try that one more time. One of my spiritual teachers told me not to make an important life decision until after 30 days of constant spiritual practice. I tell you, this has been one of the best pieces of advice I have ever been told and has saved me from many rash decisions. You may now be wondering what I mean by spiritual practices. They take different forms and have a multitude of expressions in almost every faith tradition I know of, but their aims and results are the same in that they help us detach from the stories and chatter of our minds and reconnect us with our souls. Here are some of my favorite spiritual practices I do at least one or two each day. Sometimes I do the same one for months, and sometimes I mix it up from day to day. Number one, to meditate in silence. There are numerous ways to meditate, but I prefer the one that resembles centering prayer. In centering prayer, I breathe in and out in silence while I focus on one word I have chosen: love, hope, courage, whatever it is. The purpose of that word is to ground me when my thoughts wander, kind of like a paperweight. Journaling is number two. Sometimes it helps me to detach from my mind by downloading all of the thoughts in my mind. This exercise is akin to cleaning out cluttered cabinets. When I am especially overwhelmed, angry, or anxious, I'll sit down and write the question, what thoughts are filling your mind right now? And then I will just let it rip and put every single thought down on paper. Afterwards, I do not judge those thoughts in any way. I just think with neutrality, that's what was in there. Then I move on with my day feeling much lighter. A gratitude exercise. Get out a piece of paper and for 5 minutes, write nonstop about everything you love in your life, from your family and friends to the chair you're sitting in to a hot cup of coffee or tea. This exercise helps us to reframe our minds when they are stuck in a pattern of complaint, insecurity, or scarcity. And number 4 is loving kindness meditation. I love the Buddhist loving kindness meditation. It always, without fail, softens my heart and makes me more loving and joyful. Number 5, Tai Chi chants. While Eastern religions are especially known for their mystical and contemplative practices, Christianity also has a rich tradition of mysticism and contemplation. One such tradition is Tai Chi chanting, where you sing a simple chant over and over again. Number 6, do a forgiveness practice. I will do a much longer post sometime on the importance of forgiveness, but I believe forgiveness is one of the most important catalysts for living more joyful lives. We don't even realize how much resentment we hold against ourselves throughout our days, holding so much resentment against others and ourselves until we intentionally reflect on who we need to forgive. On days when I have at least 30 minutes to myself, I might ask the question, what do I need to do to let go of something in order to forgive or to be able to live a happier life? Naming is one thing, but of course, actually forgiving is an entirely different issue. Compassion can help immensely in forgiving ourselves and others. In order to summon this compassion, ask yourself, what circumstances in this person's life led them to do what they did? What else would I realize about this person if I were more conscious of them? This question and answer process helps us to take other people's actions less personally. This practice also enables us to extend compassion upon our own selves because we often subject ourselves to unreasonable expectations. These are a few of the favorite ones off the top of my head, but I know of many more that help others: walking meditation, hiking, praying, etc. Choose the ones that work for you and commit to a daily practice. It doesn't have to be lengthy. Even just 5 minutes of silent meditation is a great start. So, for our message today, I've been reflecting on this idea of what it means to have a spiritual practice. And um, one of the things that I think about is what kind of drew me to Unitarian Universalism. Specifically, why did I walk in the door and why did I stay? Um, I had been a big part of the Catholic tradition in my family growing up for years. My mom is still a Catholic. My dad has left the church. My sister left the church. My brother did, but my mom still is. So I'm still anchored to some of those practices, rituals that come along with the Catholic tradition. But one of the things that I loved about Unitarianism or Unitarian Universalism versus Catholicism is, for me, when I would go to a Catholic Mass, it was so ritualistic that it almost didn't allow for my own spiritual beliefs or spiritual practices or reflection on what spirituality meant to me. I found oftentimes when I was engaged in Catholic ritual that I was repeating prayers with no meaning whatsoever to myself, that oftentimes the prayers numbed me. And we know this from psychology and from science, right? That the more you repeat something, the more a stimulus is presented to you, the more it loses its meaning to you. You don't have any attention to it anymore because you've become numbed to it. And I think that's what happened to me spiritually. In Catholicism, I became numb and bored with the ritual. It felt like it was not getting at the hunger that I had in myself to understand the world and the divine and what those things actually meant to me. I love Unitarian Universalism because, in many respects, the Unitarian side, right? The idea that there's a Unitarian God, a Unitarian energy force, however we want to define that. Some people use God, some people use the divine. But also the Universalist side, the idea that there were multiple paths to truth, that there wasn't one single answer and one single ritual and one single way to experience God or the divine or Mother Earth or whatever language we want to use in sort of expressing what that means. So it was easy for me to walk away from Catholic traditions beyond some of the obvious issues that I have with some of their core belief systems, which I just disagree with fundamentally. But the ritual, right, of Catholicism became numbing to me and not meaningful to me. And I'll never forget, I've had this conversation with my mom on multiple occasions that, you know, when I was in high school, we were basically told, even if we had jobs and things, that when the opportunity presented itself, we needed to go to church. And if we didn't go to Catholic church, they just wanted us to go to a church. But the bottom line was, my mom expected us to go to Catholic church, and that was that. My dad was sort of silent on the issue, and in later conversations, come to find out he didn't really like the Catholic church at all himself. So it is what it is. So the story evolves where I was getting up and had to be at work oftentimes at a bakery at 8 o'clock on a Sunday, right? So we had to open up the bakery and we had to make sure we were there for early customers. And then we dealt with all the church going crowd. It was this lovely Italian bakery in Danbury, Connecticut. And I will never forget, going into and telling my mother that I said I would go into the mass, the 7 o'clock mass that was always managed by the pastor of the church. And he was called Father Hale. And Father Hale had his express mass. And I can tell you that I never understood a word that he said at the pulpit because he said it so fast, because he wanted to be done so quickly. And I'm sure that it was numbing to him as well. I don't question his faith and his belief system, but I absolutely can understand how the ritual numbed him after a while. Because he would go through and go, and he'd go through this whole ritual, and we were done in 25 minutes. I still don't know what I got from those services, but I went because my mother told me I needed to go. And so I had this conversation with my mom when I saw her, a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "I'm sorry," she goes, "We did the best we could." I'm like, I get it. I said, but just understand where I'm coming from. That just didn't mean anything to me anymore. It didn't give me anything because I was there because I had to be, not because I wanted to be, and not because I actually got anything from the experience. So anyway, my own history and issues with this aside, I think it is really important that we recognize what spiritual practices mean to us and which ones are important to us and which ones we put value on. Specifically, every church has its own rituals, right? In Catholicism, it's all the sacraments and how important it is to experience those sacraments. And obviously, if you're not a priest, you can experience 6 of the 7, right? And if you are a priest, you can experience, 6 of the 7, right? You don't have to get married or you don't become ordained, but the rest of them are all there for free will to be able to engage in. Any faith has its own spiritual practice, whether it's in Judaism, practicing Yom Kippur, or in Islam, Ramadan, or in Hinduism, all sorts of different festivals, Diwali, and different ways of seeing the world, and all of those practices are about connecting people to their spiritual nirvana or their spiritual goal through the lens of whatever the gospel is, or the core tenets of that faith tradition. And what I love so much about UU, as I've said earlier, was that there wasn't one ritual that mattered. Like, and we have some rituals, obviously, we have our chalice lighting and things like that, but they're not heavy rituals. They are lighter rituals. And what I love is that I can learn about Islam, and I can learn about Judaism, and I can learn about humanism, and I can learn about theism sitting next to people who are atheists and deists and pagans. And we learn and we gain experience and connection with all these different practices all in one place. And to me, this is what Unitarian Universalism stands for. This is the core of spirituality, to not believe that there's only one right way to be spiritual, to be a citizen, to be whatever, that there are multiple paths to that truth. And I love that Unitarian Universalism actually pushes us to accept and understand different paths, whatever that is, in any circumstance, not just about spirituality, but pretty much everything, to be able to really learn and sit and understand someone else's point of view, to be able to understand what it is that they are trying to communicate, teaches us patience, to listen, to understand, and to find the common ground, to respect other people's paths, whatever those might be. I love that we have the freedom to be able to find our own truth. And we see this in our third and our fourth principles, where the third one says we accept and encourage the growth of the spiritual growth of our congregation. And then the fourth one basically saying we have a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And when we honor those things, particularly as we honor that in the context of our interconnectedness as individuals and as groups and as societies and as a world and as living beings, as spiritual beings in this world, this is so important to us. As I was doing some research to put together this service, and particularly this message, I ran into this little message talking about the importance of the things that we need to have a good life, or to have good well-being, I guess is probably the better way of putting it. And it talked about three things. It talked about having economic well-being, social and emotional well-being, and then intellectual and spiritual well-being. And I'm going to come back to this in a moment, and I'll sort of weave this all together. So when we think about then about spiritual practices and how does it sort of fit into our well-being, and what we know about spirituality in and of itself, it is about the practices, the disciplines, the inner work that we do to learn about ourselves, to understand ourselves, to heal, to grow, to forgive, all the things that we even talked about in today, some of the readings. But it also is about how we interact with others. Spirituality isn't just about what I do inside myself to make myself a better person, and just the internal work, but it's also that external work. And this is what I love and appreciate about sort of this non-traditional faith tradition that we're in, which is Unitarian Universalism, which says it's not just what we believe, because we all have different beliefs, but it's really how it manifests itself in our day-to-day practice. How do we interact with others? How do we care for others? How do we make sure that others are lifted up? That we're not standing on their shoulders, we are kneeling down and lifting them up to come to be with us wherever we are, as we do our own internal work, lifting up others to be a part of that with us. Spiritual development then can only move forward if we engage in all these aspects in our life, that we need to have economic well-being, social and emotional well-being, as well as intellectual and spiritual well-being. And it's interesting, I listened to a talk, Paula Moore and I went to listen to this talk about how important it is for sexual health, okay? For us to be able to have spiritual health and to be able to have social health and emotional health and economic health in order to have spiritual health and sexual health. So what I took away from that little lecture that she and I got to see was that all aspects of our life are intertwined, and that it is really important for us to make sure for justice, social justice, that we make sure that there is economic justice and social and emotional justice and intellectual, spiritual justice and sexual justice, that we need to have all of those things together in order for us to be spiritual beings having a human experience. I really like that saying as well. So think about economic, and what do we do as Unitarians in terms of economic well-being? And of course, we donate to our church to keep our church's economic health strong. And And let's be honest, I mean, this has been hard in this time with the pandemic when so many of us are unemployed or on limited incomes, and it's a struggle. But we know that it's important for us to be able to lift up others in that circumstance, which is why we have our minister's discretionary fund, where we can give money to those who need it, in small doses where it's appropriate. Someone needs a bus pass, we can buy them a bus pass. We do our fourth Saturday distribution of items, so that we can make sure people have things to care for themselves physically. That creates economic well-being, because then they can take the money they would normally spend on personal care items and they can spend it on the things that they need for it. They can spend it on food or medicine or things that keep them well. So we do, as Unitarians, we do our best to try to make sure that we are giving back to others and we are helping those who need it, who financially need it, to lift them up, to have a good quality of life. We also are engaged in social and emotional well-being, and our congregation is that. When we have our potlucks and our social hours, we are engaging in social and emotional well-being, that we look out for each other, that we have each other's back, that we share our sorrows and our joys and our struggles as much as we can. And I do miss that. I miss our time face to face. I love our virtual coffee hour. It's been wonderful. If you haven't been a part of it, please come and join. It is so wonderful and so joyful, to just see everybody's face and to talk about what's going on in our lives. And it's so necessary. It's so needed for us to feel that connection. But in terms of our social and emotional well-being, again, we recognize that there's going to be ups and downs. There's no easy time ever. Congregations have ups times and down times. People have up times and down times. And the goal, of course, is that when you realize your interconnectedness, that we are connected and support each other, that we do get through tough times, and we do get through emotional upheavals and dealing with all sorts of things that we have to deal with. Sort of lastly then is this idea of the intellectual and the spiritual. And again, what I greatly appreciate when it comes to Unitarian Universalism is the importance of this interplay between our intellectual and our spiritual well-being. I mean, it's not a surprise or a secret that we are scientists and intellectuals, and we love and appreciate the value of learning and understanding things. And what I appreciate so much about Unitarian Universalism and about our congregation is that sometimes when you go into the pulpit, it's not always about spiritual issues. Sometimes it's about intellectual issues, and how do we think about things, and how do we make decisions, and how does this relate to our 7 principles to help us to be more interconnected, to care for our environment, to care for the political process, whatever it might be. And all of those things together feed our spirituality, that we do our internal work, dealing with our own social emotional issues, the social emotional issues then externally of the people around us, our own intellectual and spiritual growth and that of those around us, our economic work to help and lift up others, as well as what we need sometimes to help ourselves intellectually, economically, going out, getting work, getting jobs, doing meaningful work. All of those things are a big part of that. So where does this sort of pull me back into this idea of spiritual practices? Find whatever spiritual practice is meaningful for you. The most important spiritual practice that we have as Unitarians is our gathering on Sundays and our service to the community. And right now, we're kind of limited in that because of the pandemic. We're doing the best we can. And these virtual services are a big part of that. So I highly recommend people engaging in these things as much as we can, watching the services, coming to our coffee hour, virtual coffee hour, and connecting with people and remembering how important it is for us to stay connected. And I think that this is really important for us. but also recognizing even if you don't sit in the pew and you're not able to listen to the service or come to a live service, recognize that, everything is holy, right? The Peter Mayer song. I don't know, if we're going to be able to get that song into our service here today, but that Peter Mayer song, everything is holy now, whether it's the laughter of children or the sound of the ocean waves crashing on the beach or bird song outside. All of that is spiritual practice. If we take our time to sit and reflect about what it means to us, about how that can influence what we do every day. And I loved the reading today because it really got into all different ways that we can have spiritual practice, a forgiveness practice, a gratitude practice, walking in nature. All of these things are spiritual practice. And I'll be honest, given this pandemic, stress has been high. I've been trying to get work done. I get distracted really easily. It's been hard to have a spiritual practice. And I've lost my practice. I've lost my meditation. I've lost my yoga, the things that used to ground me. And I know that I keep saying, I want to do it. I want to get back to it. And it's hard. It is hard. But I was reading something by Ram Dass the other day, and he talked about that's part of the practice, is recognizing that even when it really sucks and it's really hard, that's also the practice, is recognizing that it's hard. And he goes, and then when you're ready, you go back, you do it, you try, you manage it, whatever that is. And so I think that message from Ram Dass was really essential for me to forgive myself, right? That forgiveness journal is about forgiving myself also for not always doing some of the things that I should do for my own mental health and well-being. And recognizing that, I can start at any time and I can start it right now. And maybe I will. Maybe when I'm done with recording this information, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to go pick peaches and I'm going to connect and relax and be with my family and do what I need to do. And I hope that you will think about that yourself as you go about your day, as you go about your week. How can you make even the most mundane things, such as washing the dishes or doing your laundry, a spiritual practice, a way of saying, I'm going to put myself out there and do this for my own physical well-being, my own economic well-being, my own social and emotional well-being, because that all contributes to our spiritual well-being. All right, blessed be. We offer the gentle reminder that this community of faith is supported only by your giving. We need each other, and in times of trial, we need each other even more. You may mail your gift to First Unitarian Church, Post Office Box 494, Alton, Illinois, 62002, or you can give electronically by searching for the First Unitarian Church of Alton on the Givelify app or via the link on our webpage. Give what you will, for you are a generous people. If you know our offering prayer, please join with me in repeating it. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. When we gathered together in person, this is where we would pause and share our thoughts about the message of the day or the theme of the month. I thought it might be helpful to share a story that parents could discuss with their children, or as adults, we can take the time to consider what this message means to us in terms of our spiritual practice. Please enjoy The Boy and the Ocean by Max Lucado. This story is called The Boy and the Ocean by Max Lucado. The little boy rolled over in his bed and opened his eyes. Through his window, he could see the ocean. Big and blue, rolling waves, water crashing on the beach. The little boy stood at the window and searched for the end of the ocean. He couldn't see it. He could see the ships on it. He could see the birds above it. He could see the horizon stretched across it, but the little boy couldn't see the end of it. He couldn't see the end of the ocean. Would you like to play in the ocean? His mother asked. The little boy stood on the edge of the water with his mother. She took his hand and they waded into the surf. When the water covered his feet, he looked up at her. When it reached his knees, he took a breath and squeezed her hand. When the water rushed against his chest, she laughed, and he did too. The two sat in the sand and let the waves splash around them. God's love is like the ocean, my little boy, she said. It's always here. It's always deep. It never ends. God's love is special. The little boy spent the day playing near the ocean. He counted starfish. He built sandcastles. He searched for shells. But most of all, he watched the ocean. He could see the clouds above it. He could feel the tide within it. He could taste the salt inside it, but he could never see the end of it. He could never see the end of the ocean. That night, as the moonlight stretched across the sea and landed on his face, he listened to the waves slap, slap, slap against the sand. Go to sleep, my little boy, his mother whispered. The ocean will not leave. The ocean will not change. The ocean is like God's love, always here, always deep. It never ends. God's love is special. And so the boy slept with the sound of the ocean in his ears. The next day, the little boy looked out at a different window at the mountains. High and tall, white-tipped, touching the clouds. The little boy looked from side to side to see the end of the mountains. He couldn't see it. He could see the trees growing among them. He could see the snow glistening on top of them. He could see the birds flying around them, but he couldn't see the end of the mountains. Would you like to hike the mountains? His father asked. He took the boy's hand, and together they started up the mountain trail. When the leaves scattered over the boy's feet, he looked up at his father. When the wind shook the tall trees, he took a breath and squeezed his father's hand. When they looked out over the great valley, the father smiled, and the boy did too. The two sat on a rock and looked around them. God's love is like the mountains, my little boy, the father said. It's always here. It's always big. It never ends. God's love is special. The two spent the day playing in the mountains. The boy splashed in the creek. He picked flowers in the meadow. He listened to the singing birds. But most of all, he looked at the mountains. And he could see the sky above them. And he could feel the wind blow through them. And he could hear the water that bubbled between them. But he could never see the end of them. He could never see the end of the mountains. That night, as the moon appeared from behind the peaks, the boy thought of the mountains and smiled. Go to sleep, my little boy, his father whispered. The mountains will not leave. The mountains will not change. The mountains are like God's love. Always here, always tall. It never ends. God's love is special. So the little boy slept with the thoughts of mountains in his dreams. The next day, he ran on the beach and swam in the water. He chased his puppy up the mountain trail and looked for flowers. When the day ended, he and his parents lay on the grass and looked at the night sky. Stars everywhere, twinkling, shimmering, diamonds in the dark. He looked as far as he could to see the end of the sky. He couldn't see it. He could see the moon, yellow and round. He could see the clouds, puffy and fat. He saw a star race from one side of the sky to the other, but he couldn't see the end of the sky. Would you like to count the stars? His mother and father asked. So they tried. A dozen here, 2 dozen over there. There were too many. When he reached 100, the boy looked up at his mother. When the wind turned chilly, his father held him close. His parents looked up into the big sky and became quiet. So did he, for a while. Then the boy spoke. God's love is like the night sky, he told them. It's always here. It's always big. It never ends. God's love is special. The boy, the mother, and the father stayed for a long, long time, near the ocean, close to the mountains, beneath the sky, surrounded by God's love. And they smiled. Whether you believe in the divine, or God, or Allah, or Mother Earth, think about ways that you can connect with others and with your own spiritual practice. I love this story because to me, the ocean, or simply even being near or on the water, is an essential part of my spiritual practice. I feel most connected with nature, the divine, with God, when I close my eyes and contemplate the immensity of the world that is before me. The ocean is deep and vast and contains life that we haven't even begun to contemplate. It is a great metaphor for me when it comes to my spirituality. It is fluid and ever changing, but it grounds me when I consider its power and its ability to sustain life. Use this time to consider what spiritual practice sustains you. Commit, even if it is just for 5 minutes, to engage that practice to ground yourself and to connect with the divine.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat. My blue boat home.
I hope that this time of reflection was fruitful for you. Perhaps you will share the fruits of your labor with someone significant to you. I also invite you to post your thoughts in the comments of this video. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're here. Here are our announcements for the week. Please contact the church office if you have an event or announcement that you would like us to share via our weekly Church This Week email. If you are interested in receiving our weekly email, please send your contact details to church@firstuualton.org. And remember to join us next week for our virtual service here on YouTube. Now, if you have a lit chalice or candle near you, I invite you to join me in extinguishing the chalice. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are keepers of this flame until we meet again. Our closing words are by Joel Miller. Let our lives be a prayer that waters dry souls, mends broken hearts, refuses to be terrorized, seeks this world's beauty, and carries us through its storms. Thank you for your service and your time today, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.